hasn't been finalized yet, but Kellen Moore's getting very close to hiring his offensive coordinator for the 2025 season. Let's talk about it right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Houdat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Voglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers. You've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, heard offshore. Scott Vicknair handles it all. Give a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. Kellen Moore is in the process of putting together his first staff with the Saints, and truthfully, when you are the last team hiring and you're putting together your crew, there's a good chance that, some of the hires aren't going to be great. And Kellen Moore, a year from now, could probably reassess with a loaded crop of coaches at his disposal and make some changes. And I kind of believe that's where we'll be heading in a year from now, regardless of what the Saints record is. I think Kellen Moore will have an opportunity to really improve his staff next year. Obviously, at this point, you don't have as many options. One option that Kellen Moore has absolutely had from the rip is bringing in Doug Nussmeier. And although it hasn't been confirmed yet, it seems like he is by far and away the favorite to be the Saints offensive coordinator. It sounds like a deal will get done this week. And for me, I think bringing in Doug Nussmeier is the type of move that, as a Saints fan, I don't see how you can really dislike it at all. The history that him and Kellen Moore have had the last couple of seasons, whether it's with the Cowboys, the Chargers, or the Eagles, is pretty impressive. And they've worked with really good quarterbacks in Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, now Jalen Hurts. And I think being able to bring that to New Orleans when one of the main question marks for this team is quarterback play and who's going to be the quarterback, to have two guys that know how to uplift that position is a huge, huge advantage for the Saints. So I think bring in Doug Nussmeier is a plus. I think adding more talent from that Eagles staff is obviously a huge benefit to the Saints. We saw how good that coaching staff was this season with them winning a Super Bowl. And I think for Doug, I think it's a really good spot for him, right? You continue to climb up the ladder. Now you'll get to be the OC, albeit Kellen Moore will call plays. But that collaboration between Doug Nussmeier and Kellen Moore is paramount for New Orleans. And to keep that going is great. And look, like I said, there's going to be moments where I think Kellen Moore's probably going to consider making staff changes next offseason. And I anticipate that he will. But I don't think it's going to be this one. I think this is one of those hires that when you bring in Kellen Moore, you feel pretty good about him being a package deal with Doug Nussmeier. And then the focus shifts over to who the heck will the quarterback be, and we'll see. But it seems like the Saints have their offensive coordinator. I'm more than okay with this hire. I think this is a really good move for the Saints. And I think it's going to make a lot of people start to speculate about who they may draft this year or next year, of course. But I really do like the move. It's not just him, though, this week that we've heard about with the Saints and their staff. There's a couple other moves that they've made. So let's just rattle through them and talk about them real quick. Quarterbacks coach, Scott Tolzien, former Packer, former Colt, former Mike McCarthy guy. He is now in New Orleans working with Kellen Moore. And I really like this move. I actually thought Scott Tolzien was going to be the quarterbacks coach for New Orleans with Mike McCarthy potentially as the head coach. So Kellen Moore, obviously head coach, still able to land this hire. He's, according to a lot of people, described as a up-and-coming coach who's rising up the ranks, really, really good college quarterback. Obviously, NFL career-wise didn't pan out that well, but he's also been kind of climbing up. And I think this is a nice hire for the Saints with some potential there for Scott Tolzien. So I'm very pleased with that one. We talked about it earlier this week. They're retaining Keith Williams at wide receiver coach. They're actually bringing back Joel Thomas to coach the running backs, which I think is kind of interesting. Fascinating to figure out what the reason might have been that kind of brought him back to New Orleans, because you left New Orleans for a reason. What's the reason bringing you in? I'm curious to see. We'll see if that reunion ends up paying dividends for the Saints. Like we mentioned before, Brendan Nugent coaching the O-line. For the tight end group, we got Chase Hazlitt, so some family ties there. And then O-line assistant still Jari Evans. Hopefully Jari Evans can continue to work his way up the ladder. Obviously, us Saints fans love him dearly. So in terms of offensive staff, you're just waiting for the OC hire to be official, but Kellen Moore has pretty much put together everything he needs to, at least for his first year. And obviously, he can make some tweaks next offseason. But offensively, the Saints have put a good staff around Kellen Moore, and I think they've done a good job. Defensively, got to make the hire first, whether it is Brandon Staley, maybe it is Christian Parker, maybe it is Durante Jones from the Vikings. So whoever they go with, then you go from there. You figure out who that coach wants on his staff, and you kind of assess. But in terms of getting the offensive side of the coaching staff together, Kellen Moore has pretty much wrapped that up. We're just waiting for the Doug Nussmeier one to be official. But I think this is an intriguing move for the Saints. I have no issues about them bringing in Doug Nussmeier. And I'm just curious to see how this plays over with the fan base. So let me know your thoughts below. Do you like the idea of Doug Nussmeier being the OC? Are you a little worried about that? Put it down in the chat below and we'll get to you. And as always, guys, make sure to subscribe to Boo Crew Media and stay tuned for more content from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.